Yeah. I've been playing it nonstop. I've been losing sleep playing this game.
I think the game is why I'm sick.
Yeah,
So,
probably.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm gonna play it right now. All right, welcome back to the Jaunty Mantis podcast. This is a podcast full of creative questions for curious gamers, and we are those two curious gamers. My name is Matthew. I'm one of their co-hosts, and Jesse is our others. Jesse, how have you been doing?
I'm sick today.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
Thanks. It's gonna be fun because I feel like I've just got this new microphone and everything's gonna come through in a lot more clarity. So I'm gonna try not to let fly into it.
Mm-hmm. We have a
But other than
special.
that, I'm excited
Why
about
are you
today's topic.
excited? Because we have a special topic for today, do we not?
We do. You had a great question that you texted me the other day.
What was that?
Can Baldur's Gate 3 improve Dungeons and Dragons?
Well, yes, Dungeons and Dragons, but I think what I was specifically trying to say was, can Baldur's Gate 3 improve TTRPGs in general? And I know we talk a lot about Dungeons and Dragons on this show, and we probably will talk about mostly Dungeons and Dragons on this episode, but I wanted to make sure we included that this game, I think, has the ability to change the way they run and play in TTRPGs. Is definitely going to be changed for my sake. So I'd like to start us off with some first impressions of the game. Maybe we give like a starter kind of cover for it, just in case you're listening to this in the future. Baldur's Gate 3 is probably one of my most favorite, if not favoriteest, video games. It's come out recently, and it is the first video game I've ever seen that is very adequately and excellently portrayed what the gaming experience at the table is like in a computer game or video game kind of setup.
Yeah, it makes me mad about all the time as a youth I spent playing the SSI gold box games because
I remember those.
yes, this is so much better. So much.
Mm-hmm.
And it dropped August 3rd, which from our recording date makes it about uh I can't do math. 2.5 weeks old. It's
Yeah,
been out in
yeah.
the world.
Yeah, I was gonna pass on this game, just because the style of game is not my favorite thing. Nothing against Divinity Sin, Original Sin, or whatever it's called, or the other Baldur's Gate games. It just never really interested me. And I'm so glad I decided to crack this one open and give it a shot, because this is going to be something I play a lot. This is going to be one of those games where I keep it on my computer and play it every so often for sure.
Yeah. What was your first big hook?
My first big hook to get me into this game
Yeah.
was I was actually listening to other people talk about it, and they were talking about how, and so maybe we should start out things out by saying, like, this is going to be full spoilers. I'm purposely not going to try to spoil anything for Jesse. He's not going to spoil anything for me if we haven't gotten to the same parts in the game, but we are not going to shy away from just discussing them here. So if whatever point you're listening to this, if you don't want to know anything about the game, by all means, maybe you want to skip this one. But I figured this has come out late enough that if you're a fan, you've already gotten as far as we have, because I've looked at every single little thing that I could, talked to every single person I could, made different decisions, gone back and tried them again. But my first hook was, I heard on another podcast, I heard the hosts talking about one of the very first things that happens in the game. Your character wakes up on an illithid ship, and gets free. And as you're making your way through the ship, trying to, look around, you hear this voice, this childlike voice. You follow it, It takes you up to the upper level. You find a cadaver and there's a wriggling brain inside. And because these are mind flayers, you're like, oh shit, that's a baby intellect devourer. And you go through these sequences of choices where you decide how, what you want to do with it, how you want to handle it. And there was this great revelation amongst the hosts where 2 out of 3 of them had killed the mind flayer in the brain. They're like, this thing's evil. It's, we got to end it. And then the other guy was like, did you know you could actually get it out of the body and then like help it? And then it follows you around and then you could like use it as like a dog. And I was like, you gotta be fucking kidding me. This game, I need to look into it.
Oh, us.
Yeah.
Rest in
Yeah.
power, King.
Yeah. What about you? What was your first hook into the game?
Well, it's really funny because the first time I fired it up, in that starting Illithid ship, there are all of these vials of acidic brine. And I started just smashing all of them to see if there was treasure inside. And it sprayed acid all over the floor, and I wasn't paying attention. And I died. I died before leaving the second room. From my own foolish actions. I was like, oh, this game ain't messing around.
Mm-hmm.
So I took a little break from it, and then I came back and encountered us and all that. And all your playthroughs of the first part, because I know you've got multiple ones. Here's a
Mm.
question. Have you lobotomized it?
I have not. I cannot bring myself to do it.
That's the other thing about this game. There are
Mm-hmm.
some choices, moral choices, that I'm like, I just can't do it. I know it's a bad thing,
Yeah.
like, but I just can't. Like, it's so young, so new to the world.
Mm-hmm.
I just can't, dig out part of it to make it more docile.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Yeah. And I think that speaks to like the pure magic of this game where it's like it gives you this feeling like you can do anything. Like they keep saying this ship is going to crash and usually in a video game you're like this ship's not going to crash. I can look around and do whatever I want. And you like we have such a built-in way that we play games where we expect them to go, and when a game like this has such depth and an ability to surprise you, make you I've regretted decisions that I've made. I've found things that I didn't, because I've done multiple first character playthroughs because I wanted to get a sense of what the classes were like and how they functioned, and I've noticed things that didn't happen with the other character, like um have you fallen asleep with Asterion lurking around your camp yet?
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
so Asterion's a vampire.
yeah. Well, just today, and I'm not very far in the game, I found an exsanguinated boar
Mm-hmm.
near where our camp is, and Asterion really did not think we needed to spend any time with it. And I was like, hmm.
Mm-hmm. So did you have the moment where he's creeping over you and you wake up and catch him as he's about to drink your blood and
No,
oh
no.
no, okay.
No, I knew. No, I can feel that in the card. I've seen him sneaking around camp. You
Okay.
know, so
All right. Well, I broke my rule about trying not to spoil this for Jesse, but I'm gonna go ahead and spoil a part for Jesse that I just did. So you wake up and he's about to feed on you, and then you have a sequence of prompts and things you can say that go into a conversation. And the first time I did it, I didn't have any bite marks on me through the rest of the sequence. This time when I did it, my character has bite marks. So that motherfucker already bit me and I woke up after it. That's how fucking amazing this game is, because during this whole sequence, I'm like, why does my character have two really dark, scratchy bite marks on her neck? And I'm like, that wasn't in the other save before. And I went back and went to that other character and did it again. And sure enough, not there. Different character, different class. There must be like a perception check or something for you to wake up or whatever after, either before or after he's drinking from you. I swear it. It's not there in the other version. And the game is filled with shit like this.
yeah, yeah. I just found a potion of speak with animals because I'm not running a druid, and I'm so
Mm.
excited. And then I talked to a frog. And have you been to the wetlands yet? The bright wetlands.
I don't think I've been to the wetlands yet. No.
Don't. It's Yeah, I don't want to spoil that. It's just,
Mhm.
but it's horrific. I've made some choices. One of my eyes is green now.
Oh wow.
Um, yeah, it's a
See, and
it's
I've
a whole
played a
thing.
lot more of the game that Jesse has, and I haven't found this yet.
It's Did you find the Harpy Nest by the
Mm-hmm.
Druid Enclave?
Mm-hmm.
That was cool. That was a
Yep.
hard fight. Yeah, I'm sure there's something to do with the dark mines you find on the Illithid ship. I've been carrying them around. I just don't know
Mm-hmm.
what it is yet.
Yeah, mine are at camp. I put them in the chest.
I found out in the swamp why you're not transforming as fast.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Interesting. I look forward to getting there or not looking forward to getting there, but loving every second of it. Yeah. You can do amazing things. They have story characters in this game, and you can accidentally get them killed, or you can make decisions to kill them yourselves, or you can use them in certain amounts. They can get upset with you and leave your party. I found that out. There's all sorts of great things you can do. You can use items, and the game does not. The game will give you minor tutorials if you want them, but it won't teach you all of these things. Like I have so much rope on my characters, and I still don't know how to use it. I don't even know if you can use it. I assume you can, and I'm going to need it at some point. And so I've got like 17 piles of rope.
Yep. I think that's one of the things interesting just to mention. As much as there's been a ton of praise, like people throw around the terms game of the year,
Mm-hmm.
all kinds of stuff. That's one of the critiques I've been reading is people are like, of course, why wouldn't I save? Because if I, don't play a high charisma character, I get the conversation option wrong, and then I don't have the resources I need for the combat sim part of the game. And maybe it's the generation of player that I am. I'm just like, you never get to really go into a fight optimal. It's a fight. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's stakes. There's a
Mm-hmm.
flee button. Use it. Like,
Right, right. I definitely say whatever way you want to play this game, as long as you're getting enjoyment out of it, you're doing it correctly. I will do, I think the term is called save scumming or whatever, but I do that only with stuff at camp because after that vampire bite, I just want to start exploring conversations to see where they go. And that is kind of a lead into our topic tonight, which is how can or can Baldur's Gate 3 teach us more about gaming in general or change gaming for us, because I'm at the point where I'm practically studying this game and how it does things. And that's where I start save scumming is like I'll be in a social situation in the camp, I'll go through a set of options, and then I'll be like, well, wait a minute, what if I said this other thing, and what does that lead to, and how much of that game does it change? And in some cases it doesn't change anything, or it changes a little, or it changes a lot. So I've been just entranced with this idea of just exploring the options in addition to the game. Like this Baldur's Gate 3 is something I'm going to be playing for years, in my opinion. So let me give you an example of a first thing that I thought was a way that Baldur's Gate 3 could change tabletop role-playing games, especially Dungeons and Dragons. And this is painful for me to admit. I'm kind of embarrassed by this, but in Dungeons and Dragons, they have the difficulty class set for different tasks that you can have the players experience in the game, climbing a mountain, jumping over, a ledge, or trying to, charm the guard into letting you pass the door. And D&D has always given you that DC 5 as the easiest, difficulty class to set the rolls at. And I've never used it once, because I was like, if it's easy and it's a DC 5, what's the point? Why not just have them get it? And this game has shown me why you have a DC 5 difficulty class whenever you can, because it creates role play, it creates circumstance. Like I used to look at Dungeons and Dragons and the way you roll the d20 and use skills or ability checks, and I never looked at it in this way of saying, well, this is an opportunity for more role play. I always looked at it as an unnecessary barrier.
yeah, I feel the same way about DC 10 skill checks as well. Which normally I'm like, wow, 10, it's probably more than a 50-50 chance. I don't know. Yeah, it's great. And then like I never use DC 20. So, um,
Interesting.
and I mean, this doesn't have to be D&D on this one. Any system with a skill check that's hard whatever you got to do, like put a penalty on it if it's Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay or whatever, like to make it a significant challenge with a very low chance of success. I made 220s today when I was
Wow. Yeah.
playing. And both times I was like, holy, like the feeling I got from making that and
Mm-hmm.
then what happened in the story. It's why I have is that why I have a green eye? Yeah, it's part of the reason I have a green eye. And I have a horn that lets me summon ogres. So, like,
So you chose not to kill the ogres like I did.
I wasn't gonna fight three ogres. Are you nuts?
I
They're
am
third
nuts. I
level.
fought them and killed them.
I did fight the couple where the coitus interruptus situation
Mm-hmm.
in the barn.
Yeah. Yeah. I had two different options depending on the different characters because I got to that one in the first run through as well. And in the first one, so for those of you who don't know, they're in this town that's being controlled by goblins and hobgoblins and ogres. You hear this like banging noise in this barn or building, and when you open up the door and all of your characters reflect this vision of horror, bemused horror, as a hobgoblin is having sex with a giant ogre, and they pull back, and you can eat, like, there's a variety of different things. In my first version, they paused, and I then had the option to be like, oh, keep going on. This is considered the height of smut at Baldur's Gate. Like, you know, and then the hobgoblin is like, oh, really? You think people would be interested in my prowess? Like, this is amazing. And then they get pissed off and they like leave because she's all, done with it. And in the version of that I'm playing now, we interrupt them and then they just attacked us, so there was no option for that. So it's definitely, an opportunity to create, circumstances and opportunities in our own games based on these kind of like small uses of game mechanics for sure. And when it comes to the three ogres, do you know why the one, like, so of those three ogres, one of them is super smart? Do you know why he's super smart?
The gourmand, I don't know why he's super smart.
If
He
you
told me it's because he has a varied diet, but
if you kill the ogres, which I did, I laid a clever trap for them where I drew them out into the streets, and I had my team up on different parts of the village on roofs, and I just like showered, ranged attacks down on them and lit grease underneath them, and all sorts of great stuff. So when you kill them and you loot his corpse, he has like a busted like crown that makes the wearer's intelligence 17.
so that's another thing that this game has done, that is a good reminder. And I think this is maybe a basic DM thing, but I usually don't do it. Is like you have a combat that's pretty clearly probably going to be a combat encounter.
Mm-hmm.
Having chatty monsters. This game's been
Beautiful.
such a great reminder to just have chatty monsters.
Yeah.
Like it's fun.
Yeah. And I think these two examples, the couple in the barn and the three ogres that you can either, in Jesse's version, you got a horn from them. Explain that.
So I'm talking to them, and the guy said, "Oh, like we don't, the goblins pay us to do this. We don't believe in, this god of theirs. They just pay us." I'm like, "Well, I could pay you." And he's like, "Oh, well, what's your offer?" And I was just like, after we kill them all, you can eat all the bodies." And it's like, make a persuasion check, DC 20. And I'm like, okay. And I did it. I rolled a 19.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
and I had a -1, and then my guidance roll was a 3. And it was like, and they're like, "All right, here's this horn, blow it and we'll be there." Like,
That's
and then
awesome.
they go running off. And I was like, I can't believe that worked. I thought I
Yep.
was going to have to run away from these ogres.
Yep. And I think that's a perfect example of what we can learn for our own tabletop games, because basically anything you can talk to in this game that you can also fight, it, in my opinion, it pays to go and talk to them and figure out what the story is, figure out what your options are, see what you can learn. And then if you're like me, just go back through and kill them all because they threaten those poor people at the Grove.
Yep. Yep. I I gotta say, this is one of the things. Okay, here's a hot take. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not saying we go back to 4E, but this game is really making me kind of question theater of the mind
Oh, wow. Interesting.
because the tactical element, the play loop I'm having with having to fight these monsters tactically
Mm-hmm.
is so enjoyable to me. Like so enjoyable to me. Like when you I'm sure you've been to the like crypt in the church
Mm-hmm.
that's right by the starting area.
Mm-hmm.
And there's those alkalites that are skeletons with 10 hit points, but they can
Yep.
cast frostbolt and
Yep.
they can cast silence. So they
Mm-hmm.
drop silence on your spellcaster and then frostbolt them so they can't move out of it.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, that's great. That
Yep.
just upped the stakes for these 10 hit point monsters.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I don't really know how that works as well in Theater of the Mind. Like all
It
the
doesn't.
grease shenanigans, it doesn't
Mm-mm.
really work as well in Theater of the Mind.
It doesn't. You're exactly right. In that same fight, what I did was I backed all of my team into the crypt after pressing the switch to open the door. And then we just went up against the walls. And as they came up, then we uh, threw grease on the ground, set it on fire, and then picked them off as they started to get in close. And I like make my characters like hide in the corners so they can't be detected. So I totally agree with you that like I isn't it weird that we're saying this because you and me are like dyed in the wool story gamers and theater of the mind just seems like that's totally our thing. And there was a time where I was like, you know what? Fuck grid hex grids and graph and little miniatures or using a virtual tabletop. We're just gonna go back to theater of the mind and it'll be great. And we've been doing that and it's been awesome. But after all the options in this game, I now want to go back to grid combat.
Like I've realized really early on, stealth and a shove is a pretty
Mm-hmm.
high utility thing. And so I made a character based
Mm-hmm.
on for my solo play, based on my character from our Takara game. So I'm
Mm-hmm.
playing as Berdine Cleargrain after he unfortunately died to 3 intellect devourers, like very shortly after starting. I restarted the game. He's doing much better now. Um, and I
Excellent.
got the pushing strike as one of my battle master tactics,
Yes.
and I have a ranged version. So anybody who's standing on a roof or a pinnacle, like I just get out the longbow and I'm like pushing shot, and if they fail their save, whoop, dead.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
It's so fun.
That is brilliant. Like there is no better feeling than pushing something off of another thing and watching them die. Yeah, it's
I mean,
like
when my first child was born and I held her in my arms, it was pretty amazing. But watching that goblet go or goblin go flying off that pinnacle of rock to impact with a wet thud on the ground below, man, so much better.
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's an amazing feature in the game. So I definitely want to use more elements like that in our standard games for sure. So what's another thing that you think this game encapsulates or uses that would serve us well in our tabletop role playing game experience? Dare I say Dungeons and Dragons, no matter the edition.
I think having a staff of professional writers and voice actors to make all your NPCs could be really helpful, including the animals. There's a couple things I've noticed that are not rules as written.
Okay.
Like the ability to use inspiration after you fail a check. We've already house ruled that in our normal games.
Mm-hmm.
That yeah, you can just do it to get a reroll. Why not? That's fun. Um, and then what's the other one? There's a lot of jumping. Yeah,
I
I
mean,
had something else.
not just inspiration after the fact, but you can accumulate inspiration. You know, in 5e, it's either you are inspired or you don't in the tabletop version.
Yeah.
And I know other people were doing this in their games before this, but I think it really opens up the game if you're able to make more uses for inspiration, which is what I want to do moving forward. I want cumulative inspiration. I want you to build it up and be able to use it after the rolls to get it right.
Well, the way they use that inspiration system too, oddly enough, it makes the background feature of 5e more meaningful.
Explain.
Well, so many of the ways you get inspiration in this game have to do with something related to your background.
Hmm.
So if you're like an alkalite and you do something that like is a special religious knowledge, you'll get inspiration from doing that. Or if you play on like you play on where you're from, like as a Baldurian or something,
Hmm.
like it's really interesting. And I'm just like, if you had triggers or awarded inspiration, I think players are pretty savvy when it comes to spendable resources. If you had like a list
Hmm.
of their backgrounds and had, you know, um,
Yeah.
triggers based on them or like suggestions,
Yeah.
it'd
I
be
mean,
pretty cool.
we're kind of already doing that with our Eberron game that I was running and then we'll be running again after a break. But we were using the bonds system from Dungeon World. And I think that when, every character had a bond with another character. And for those of you who don't know, the bond system from Dungeon World uses a question or icebreaker style prompt to involve another character. And the way that I decided to use them for the Eberron game was based on the choices you made for your character. So if you were playing a gnome in Eberron, gnomes live in a society that covets secrets. And so the opening bond is that such and such has a secret that you're interested in. I forget how I worded it exactly, but it's a shared secret between those two characters, and that's what ties them together. So I put in bonds that I ripped straight out of Dungeon World or other people's customized bonds from that you can find online, and I applied them to the character creation process and let the players choose them. And I think that that's an easy way to start handing out inspiration in a 5e game is by things that involve role playing or story elements or even clever quips between the player characters that it's a great way to encourage that kind of storied behavior, don't you think?
Yep. I think people are also more likely to spend it to make the game more swingy.
Yeah.
If they have multiple, if they know it's not going to necessarily be a while, because I think rules as written is like whenever you like represent your ideals or your bonds in game. But
Hmm.
uh, like, have you ever used the feature that comes with a background?
Never.
Yeah,
Never.
yeah. I
um
was I was thinking about that because I think what is mine, noble or soldier? Like
hmm
I've never run into someone who served in the regiment or something like blah blah. Folk hero, I've played that a lot. I've
yeah.
never like requested aid from the peasantry. Um,
Well, I will do you one better then, because in when we get back to Eberron, I have taken things that I've found primarily from the Cipher system, because the Cipher system does a version of this like beautifully, which is called GM intrusions and player intrusions. And they are ways that the GM and the player can use experience to influence the outcome of the game. So when the GM does it, it's around certain circumstances, like um, if you missed with an attack, the GM could be like, "And your weapon broke."
so that's with the intrusion. That's like the GM offers you an experience point to give to somebody else if you accept the intrusion. You don't have to, but
Right. And then on the player side of that, you can use built-in character intrusions, like for the fighter equivalent in that game, you can use like one that gives that like an old ally appears that you served with, and they can help you out with something, but they're on a mission of their own, so they got to get on their way as soon as they try to help you. And so what I did is I took those intrusions from the Cypher system and I put them into the character backgrounds, and they fit almost perfectly. So for the soldier background for 5e, you'll be able to spend a point of inspiration and get that old soldier at arms experience, that intrusion from the Cypher system, where we can be like, okay, well, somebody from your past that you served with shows up. Here are the circumstances, and you have a split second to utilize them. And I think if you give people an additional option for inspiration, I'm wondering if that will pay off.
we won't know until we try.
Yep, I'm looking forward to it. My initial reaction is to just overload the players with tons of things you could spend inspiration on, which I'm not going to do this time.
I'm glad you got there.
Yeah. I knew I would eventually. That's like one of my biggest shortcomings as a game master, is that I just want to do so much that I'm like, why wouldn't the players love to have all of these options? Here are 2 pages of things you can do and choose from. And everyone's like, ah, fuck, is he doing this again? We just want to roll dice, kill monsters, and make some jokes.
In my defense, I'm not. I'm always like, a new system to master, and it's not been play tested, so I can break it for profit and advantage. And okay, here's another one, D&D specific.
Mhm.
It's really got me tuned into the action economy.
Okay.
Like, I just feel like I wouldn't say I was a slouch at knowing the rules to D&D,
Hmm.
but I feel like now it's just like, oh man, I know. Like it is so clear, so driven home, like what that, cycle of move, regular action, one bonus action, item interaction, like what that
Hmm.
is. That game does the best job of teaching that of anything I've ever seen.
For
So,
sure. Yeah, so teaching us how to use the action economy is another great way it can improve our D&D experience for sure. I'm also wondering what kind of things that players can take away from this, for the future of their D&D games. I think there's a lot to offer here for GMs. These are our first impressions, but I'm wondering what players, can primarily take away from this experience besides learning the action economy. What do you think?
I think as a DM, you can learn to put things to make combat easier in the scene.
Like what?
So, very early on, you go to that temple and there's those bandits there,
Mm-hmm.
and they're standing on that little circle. At least two of them are. There's the archer off to the left and the mage off to the right. There's a giant weight with a rope hanging right
Mm-hmm.
above that circle. And if you shoot it, it drops and you can probably take out two of them right there.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Did you know in that ogre room, there's a crooked support for the building right next to them?
Yeah, but I couldn't figure out how to use it because I started that fight with my character that was going to tempt them to come outside to be shot to death in the streets. I was like, maybe I could just collapse this beam and bring the whole house down on them, but it wouldn't work. Like I had Lae'zel go in there and fucking try to knock it over, and nothing happened.
I'd try and
What?
throw a smoke bomb at it, I think. Do some
Interesting.
force damage to it.
Interesting. Yeah.
But now the ogres work for me because I told them they could eat all the goblins.
And in mine, they're just dead.
Yeah. And here's the other thing too, because I know we've just kind of come off. It was only a couple weeks ago for our dear listeners that we did like the alignment discussion.
Mm-hmm.
This game is like fuck alignment. Like
Yeah.
I don't care.
Well, I'm glad you
Narrative
brought that up. Yeah.
consequences, but
Well, that's the thing is it's actual consequences, right? Like you and I both kind of alluded to this earlier, but like and maybe this will discuss, diehard video gamers, but like I am playing this game as a character specifically. I am making decisions as a character. My character in this game is a cleric. It's a cleric of the life domain, and she's an old female dwarf with a soldier background. And she was fighting on the front lines of a military campaign for most of her life. And then her form of retirement is to start adventuring. And this was the backup character I had for our Takara game with Berdine. I was wrestling between two different character concepts. We discussed the first one some episodes ago about the lawful good cleric who worships an evil deity and tries to put everyone through minor points of suffering in order to avert the worst that his god has to offer. But this was the second character concept, and I'm glad I went with the first because I think it's a much better fit with the party. But that second one, the reason why I didn't go with it is because I just didn't have it fleshed out well enough. There wasn't enough there. So I'm like, well, when I do my actual playthrough, I'm going to play as her and then figure out who this character is and make decisions in the game, according to that. So there's moments where, a goblin prisoner could get shot by a pissed off tiefling woman who lost her brother to a goblin attack. And I have to sit there and think about it as to whether or not my character is going to stand in the way of that shot or just be like, look, this is your decision to make. I've been where you are right now. Once you cross this path, you'll never be able to go back. And like I will sit in front of the computer trying to think of what the appropriate character response is.
Yeah, I've my choices that I've made. I mean, beyond having different options because of their skill sets, but my warlock playthrough and my Berdine, the fighter playthrough, have been
Mm-hmm.
very, very different on the moral arc of those characters. Because like my archfey patron warlock's just like friends, charm person. We all love you. Detect thoughts. Ah, yes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, you think your brother would judge you poorly if you fired that crossbow? That's what your brain's telling me. Let me work that into the conversation. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And this, I think, also was what inspired this topic for us because we're putting our normally slated couple of episodes off to the side for this one, and then future ones because I want to do follow-ups to this after because this is our first impression episode of Baldur's Gate 3. But this was the inspiration behind it was, for a while I've been wanting to run a more on the rails style of game. And my big question to you for this episode is going to be, should I create not full prompts, but should I give players a list of options that they can do in a situation under full understanding that they don't have to follow them, not to simulate what's happening in the game, but to provide that on the rails experience and kind of show the narrative paths that things can go in? What do you think?
see, I'm adverse to that. Just
Let's hear about it.
knee
Mm-hmm.
jerk reaction is it's just, like I could see the utility. And I would say if I wanted to do the normal Jesse thing of being like reasonable, try to be reasonable and meet you halfway, I'd have a count in my head of like, I'm going to count to five in my head after I say, what do you do? And if nobody says anything, I'm going to say
Mm-hmm.
three likely options are,
You
but it
definitely.
just seems like that would be exhausting for prep on the DM side.
Oh, I wasn't going to do much prep with it. I was going to still do the same amount of prep, maybe a little bit more, using the lazy GM method of just establishing tags for that character about motivation, what they want, what they don't want, what they're afraid of, stuff like that, and then mold it in the scene so that I have the notes to work with the scene and then to run. I know where I want this to go and then deliver those kind of cues to the players. Like in this video game, they do something where like I don't do this. Like if a character is lying to you, the game is rolling a perception check and if passive perception, right? And if you pass your passive perception, the game will give you a cue as to whether or not they're lying and how severe it is. And it's up to you to decide how severe that is and whether or not you should push it. So what I want to do is use passive skill checks for everything moving forward, and just like be rolling all that as after I ask, what do you guys do? And then start delivering information based on what the results are. And maybe
Yeah, that
that's
is
too much
another
work.
thing. No, that's another thing the game does really well is like having those little cut-ins that it's just like you feel like you know that, like those things.
Mm-hmm.
Um that I find to be really, really great for prompting my choices.
Yeah.
Um I mean, obviously I think standing in, looking way back down the road after 4E, we don't necessarily want to have a TTRPG experience that just tries to chase the competition and emulate a video game.
Mm-hmm.
No shade on 4E players. Before you write us angry letters, please write us angry letters. No one sends us email. Um, but yeah, like it's just not for me, and I'm not saying it's bad.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm sorry, this is probably a weird thing to hear from something that you picked up on the internet, but just because it's not for me doesn't make it bad. Um,
What a concept.
it's weird. It's crazy.
Yeah. I another change that I want to make that ties into what we're talking about on this particular part of the conversation is that I want to make a primary skill user for encounters that like would normally require it, because a big pet peeve of mine specifically in D&D, but it's not limited to that experience, is that you will have like a room or a conversation or whatever the case, or a knowledge check, and somebody will discover that they can make an appropriate check. And then for some reason, almost everybody in the party is like, well, I make that check. Well, I make that check. I got a 22. I got a 17. I got a 5. I got a 10. And it's just like, it's a cacophony of player actions. Like it's too much. And so what I want to do in my future games is say, well, the group has to designate a primary skill user for this particular activity. Don't worry if you guys are walking down a hallway and there's a perception for a trap, like I'll give it to everybody just to make sure you guys can have a chance to catch it. But if you're in a talking to a specific character, it doesn't make sense for everybody to be just shouting stuff at that person. Not to say that other people can't say it, but if you're trying to use a skill check, the party should either nominate someone to be that conversation piece and use those skills, or somebody should just step up and the first one is the one that works. But I also want to recognize that other people want to participate. And I think this is another way we can use inspiration, right? So I want to, in my future D&D games, there's going to, in most circumstances that require it, there's going to be a primary skill user. And if anybody wants to jump in on that experience, they can either use the aid another equivalent action for 5e. I don't know what it's called. That's what it was called in 30.
I think it's
Or,
aid.
okay. Or they can spend a point of inspiration and they can also roll in it as if they were the primary skill user. And we'll leave it up to that. What do you think about that?
I don't I don't know about turn jumping in. The party designates a primary skill user probably based on the player's skill, right? So having the ability to just jump in and steal their thunder doesn't necessarily seem like a.
But that's what's already happening, though. I mean,
Yeah,
that
but if you're
happened in our
creating a
game
system to
recently.
mitigate that, like leaving the option, I don't know.
We'll have
I
to
don't know.
see how
I
it
think
plays
one of the
out.
things you should definitely do that, like with the aid and help from Dungeon World and all those, is that like if you choose to aid and roll in, if this goes sideways, you're caught up in it too.
Great point. Yes.
So an example, I just trying to think how this works with an example. So there's the trapped room in the crypt where you
Mm-hmm.
get the magic spear from the big tomb, right? First playthrough, I came at it from inside the crypt. Astarion noticed every single trap, disarmed them easily, like
Mm-hmm.
with glee, no problem. We opened the coffin, we looted the whole room. I was playing a warlock. I gave him that badass spear. We got on our happy way.
Mm-hmm.
Second playthrough multiplayer with my buddy Mark. He's a thief, so we pick the lock on the outer door and walk in. Neither one of us, we only have a shadow heart. Neither one of us notices any of the traps. I go to open the sarcophagus. The traps all go off. We all die. We have to reload. Attempt number 3, we enter from inside the church. Astarion notices the first trap. I disarm it. I go to disarm the trap on the sarcophagus. I roll a 1. The traps go off, but because we had this one vent, we only take the flame bolt damage of 4 and are able to get out of there and then time it to run back in and loot the
Oh,
sarcophagus
wow.
while the whole rest of the room, except this one corner, is on fire.
I didn't even know
All
what
of those were
happens.
great play experiences.
I didn't even know all that happens because I disarmed everything. I have
Yeah.
never seen what happens when the traps go off.
The
Wow.
vents, the fire bolts go across the room and ignite whatever's coming out of those vents as an explosive gas. So it's a combination of fireball and flame bolt
Oh,
in
wow.
the entire room.
So where do we want to see this game? What are we hoping for in the future? Well, wait a minute. Actually, before we go there, have you been romancing?
I haven't got far enough to romance yet.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Okay, I will say Astarion did have the conversation where he's lying down on his bedroll looking rather fetching and trying to be like, come hither eyes, and I'm like, yeah, I think, you know,
So that
I don't think Berdine's terribly queer. So
so that happened on my first just seeing what the game is like. It hasn't happened since. So for the character I'm actually now playing the game through, she and Astarion have like that typical where he's like super catty with her, but they both know that they're just joking around. Like he hasn't tried to make a play for her yet. I don't know what it is, but I get an approval from him and then I get a disapproval. I get an approval from him and then I get a disapproval. So he's just always at a neutral point with her.
He runs
And
hot and cold, that guy.
yeah. So it's
My
like,
lord, I will say, my warlock would have totally been down for that.
mm-hmm. Well, that's an interesting point, right? Because I'm playing what is effectively a venerable soldier old dwarf woman. And like, I didn't realize that there was sexy time in this game. I heard there was relationships, but I didn't know there was a sexy element as well. So I had to sit there and really think about whether or not like this is what I wanted in my game experience. Like I am a very sex positive person. I am not a prude about really I mean practically anything when it comes to sex. I think if you're two consenting adults, whatever you do in the privacy of your own home or out on the street is up to you. It really doesn't bother me. But the way I feel about this game in particular is kind of the way that I look at sex and nudity in a show like Game of Thrones. And if you've seen Game of Thrones, and a lot of us did, there's a lot of nudity and sexual situations. And when I watched that show, it was like I'm like, we live in a world with that is in this country, in the United States of America, we're extremely repressed sexually, and yet we sexualize everything in marketing and whatever the case may be. And we have, an embarrassment of riches when it comes to porn. However you feel about porn, there's tons of it out there. So if I really want to see sex and nudity, I can go find exactly what I'm looking for on the internet. I don't really need to see it in a show. And I'm watching a show for story and acting and development. And so usually when I see sex or nudity in a show, I don't get annoyed, but I'm like, this is getting in the way of the stuff I actually want to see, because I don't need to ogle nudity and sex in a TV show. So that's kind of how I was looking at it in the game, where I was like, I want to get to the cool story stuff. Like I don't get turned on by watching video game characters have sex, right? But then I started to think about it and I was like, okay, let's stay true to the character and let's see what happens. So there's a character named Lazelle. She's a fighter. She's a Githyanki, and she's the one who made the first pass at my character. And she was like, I misjudged you at first, but I've seen you in battle. I can't stop thinking about you. She's like, my neck's sweating every time you're around me. And she makes an offer, and I had to sit there and think about it. And I was like, you know what? My dwarf character, who was a soldier on the front lines, they probably had sexual experiences to just get that part of it out of their existence, didn't form complex relationships. This one makes sense to me. So I went ahead and let it happen. And it has gotten worse from there.
I am a bit of a prude when it comes to TTRPGs. Like I'm not like I'm not looking for that kind of fantasy in my fantasy. Like
Fair enough.
no problem with people who are, but like I'm not interested in romance. I tried it once in an Exalted game, and I
Mm-hmm.
wound up like shacking up with like a demon of the second circle, and the rest of the party was appalled. And I'm just like, oh, so we got a demon working for us now. What do you want?
Mm-hmm.
But it's just I don't know. It's not the thing that I'm looking for in my play experience. Again, I can understand why people do. So I immediately like turned nudity off, because I just figured it was going to be like when I try to watch anime, because inevitably if I find an anime series I watch, like it could be like the most compelling like giant robot mecha about the costs of war and the burden on the human soul and dreaming of a better future, and it could just be beautiful illustrations, and the moment Carrie walks in the room is the one time in 3 seasons that somebody's panties are showing and they're blushing.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yep.
so I was like, man, with the romance option, the same thing's gonna happen. Like, do I have to not play this game when my kids are awake? Like,
Yeah. Well, for that, I would say yes. You know, I do wish they kind of gave you more of an upfront um, disclaimer about it. There is a short prompt that says there's going to be some nudity. I think you just mentioned this. Check this box or whatever the case may be. But There's a part of me that's pleasantly surprised that this is an element that's in the game, and then there's a part of me that's like, a kind of, you know, wish that they just put it up in my face and said, hey, look, there's going to be some sexy time situations in here. If you want it, check this box. If you don't, or something like that. But then I probably would have checked the box so it didn't happen. And then what would I have been missing out on? Because, like, my character has only had a sexual experience with Lazelle, but on complete accident, she's charming, having a very charming relationship with Shadowheart, which I did not intend, and I think is hilarious because I've listened to a lot of people talk about this game, and a lot of people are obsessed with trying to romance Shadowheart, and I'm like, why? And I'm sitting there going like, why are they having difficulty? This is like super easy. And I was like, oh, it's because when she said she didn't want to talk about something, I didn't push it. When she said she needed a break, I gave it to her. When she said, like, look, there's a lot going on here, I said, that's cool. I respect that. Like, what a concept, huh? If you respect somebody, well, like, I'm wondering if there's a larger lesson here for other cisgendered straight white men to be like, hey, you know what happens? Like, when you treat somebody with respect, listen to them, and observe their boundaries, you may have a positive relationship with them. Not saying you're going to get to have sexy time, but things might go better for you in life. Maybe we should start doing that.
Yes. Yes.
So Shadowheart and I have been making starry eyes at each other, and Lazelle
I
seems to
don't
be
trust
okay
her.
with it. Well, her name is Shadowheart. I
Yeah.
wanted to ask you about her specifically because I feel like, and maybe this is just my experience, but I've I've I come from several origin story gaming groups that I was in that had lots of female gamers in it, and I feel like Shadowheart is playing on a female gamer trope. Not of the gamers themselves, but of the kinds of characters that I've seen female gamers make. Does that resonate with
I
you at
don't
all?
know that I know enough about her background. Um,
Oh, okay. Then we
to
will
get, I know
revisit.
she's got some glowy purple thing in her wrist that causes her pain, something to
Mm-hmm.
do with other gods or something. And I know she doesn't
Mm-hmm.
want to talk about it. And I haven't pressed because
Yeah,
she said, I
don't.
don't want to talk about it.
Yeah, and you
So,
should respect that.
yeah. Yeah. Just like, are you okay? You don't want to talk about it? Okay, cool. Let's get
Cool.
back to killing this fucking owlbear.
Yeah, yeah. Oh well, I want to revisit this because there's plenty of male gamer tropes around the kinds of characters we make. And I think that there is also tropes around the kind of characters that female gamers make. And I could be totally wrong about this. I love Shadowheart as a character. Um, Obviously, she was sitting on the sidelines until I found Withers, which I will spoil this. Do a Google search for Withers and how to get him because I don't know why he's not built into the game from the get go. So Withers will let you respec other characters. So I get to be the cleric. That's what I wanted. And then I respec Shadowheart into a bard, and she's fucking awesome as a bard.
That's so cool.
So anyway, that's Matt's weird romantic interactions in the games corner.
Yeah, I don't know. Like this is the thing about railroad, and I don't know if everybody wants this, but like when I've wandered off into that swamp, right? It was immediately clear that this was a bad place. This was very dangerous. Like I noticed somebody patrolling on the paths. I checked their hit points and I'm like, ooh, fuck, everybody's stealth. We're gonna stealth and go through this water and swamp. Everybody gets poisoned and diseased.
Jesus.
Like we talk to a frog, things happen. We go to this hut and yeah, I got a green eye now. So um and now I'm trying to figure out how to get back out of the swamp without fighting the red cap because I'm legitimately scared at this point. Like it's like
Brilliant. So
45 hit point Fey, nothing to snuff at when you're third level. Like
I love this is a feeling this game is producing in me a feeling that I think we experienced in vanilla World of Warcraft where we played Horde primarily, and there were chances where we'd be in the Forsaken starting zone and you could wander into a zone that was too high level for you, and then a son of Arugal would come out of nowhere, a giant like demonic werewolf would come out of nowhere and just like one shot you. And we spent so much time in that game exploring as a group and finding stuff and like leveling up and then coming back and like trying to fight off the son of Arigal werewolves and stuff like that. And the fact that the game is not curating a safety experience for you in vanilla World of Warcraft and in Baldur's Gate 3, it makes me want to do the same thing in in our D&D games, like not, like it, leave it up to the players. Like in the past I've said it's okay to tell your players like, hey, you might want to give this a second thought before you go into this room because there's something really bad in there that you can, and this is how you know that, to kind of like give them a heads up. I still think there's nothing wrong with that. But the way that this video game has made me feel about potential danger sweetening the pot, like it reminds me of old school D&D, like vampires weren't scary because they're vampires. They were like fucking scary because like they fucking level drain you, man. Like that's what made
Yeah,
them
whites are
terrifying.
terrifying in old school D&D.
Yeah, like so I don't want to go overboard with it, but what do you think about that? Like establishing that things could go really south. It's really up to the players. Like it's really up to the player characters where they want to take it. Because I tend to put things on guardrails and like put up little like I treat it like we're going bumper bowling. Like I put up the, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I mean that's one of the things in talking about wanting to play Rifts or like that like old school essentials player made Dark Sun hack. It's like I want it to be like this is not a balanced game. Do
Mm-hmm.
not come into this thinking this is balanced. I will provide you with hooks of things that are around you in interesting situations, and you go off and explore them. And I always say I'm going to do that, and then I pull punches, and I want to break
Yeah.
myself of that, like because
Yeah.
that's taken away the player's agency, and that's the other thing I'm getting from Baldur's Gate, and that is system agnostic.
Right.
Although I will say, uh, you really haven't fought anything in the Soulbound game that makes me think like, oh, it's all over.
Mm-hmm. Even though even though my guy did get shredded by a giant house-sized spider.
But he was the only he like tanked that thing for 4 rounds while everybody else was shooting it. So like,
Which I thought was his job. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it is. Yeah,
Working
it's
as
it's
intended.
a heroic fantasy game. But maybe I no, I shouldn't have said oh when you guys approached the
Mm-hmm.
warehouse with your plan last time.
I tend to do the same thing. I pull punches as well. And what can we do to, I mean, maybe this is an episode of itself, like how to stop pulling punches. Like, but like what do you
Roll in the
think?
open.
Well, we play on Zoom, so that kind
Yeah.
of happens in general, right?
But
Like,
with a VTT, you can hide your roles as a DM. And
oh, I didn't know it did that. Okay.
yeah, yeah. I think I want to do it like that. I think would be the advantage of a virtual tabletop.
Mm-hmm.
Like Foundry, you could have the character sheets or like a macro for the roles of the players, like down at your bottom bar. If you're running it in a virtual tabletop, would actually be easier, I think, than running it face to face or using die. So if they're
Mm-hmm.
advancing down a hallway, you can have the die rolls hidden for just like perception or whatever. And then you can just click on everybody's to be like, oh, you notice, which is a cool experience. Like
Mm-hmm.
I love the paranoia I get when I hear the dice cup rattle, and then it's just
Yes.
like, and then it doesn't tell me anything. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what
Mm-hmm.
what did I just miss? Or one of the NPCs will say something like, oh, there's something over there, and you're like, where? I don't see it. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then I click on them, and they don't see it anymore.
Yep. That's what helped me find a hatch that I didn't know was there that led into a basement that eventually helped me find a lever that I pulled that opened a bookcase that took me into a room where I had to fight a bunch of shit. And then I discovered there's a giant magic mirror in the wall. And I'm like, oh, fuck. I don't know what to do with this at all. And I've just been leaving it because I don't want to touch it. Oh my
Yep.
god. We do need to do an episode on how to make yourself stop pulling punches. Like I think that's a worthy topic, at least for a warm-up topic, if nothing else.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one of the things that I like about Rifts is like the way the mechanics of that game go. Like, short of fudging dice rolls egregiously, there's no way to pull punches. Like,
Mm-hmm.
someone who's not in mega damage body armor gets hit with a mega damage attack, they're just dead.
Right. Right.
They're paste. They're literally like a cloud of mist, or have a
Hmm.
volleyball sized hole burned through them. It's over. Like
Yeah.
you got hit with an anti-tank rifle while you were going grocery shopping. There's like
Oh,
the building you're
that'll
in is
do it.
also destroyed.
Yeah.
Like
Well, wait, let me ask you a question because we keep mentioning VTTs. Because isn't Wizards of the Coast coming out with their own virtual tabletop, like an immersive virtual tabletop experience? Do you think that that's gonna land better because of Baldur's Gate 3? Or do you think people like
uh
us will just stick with the standard, the tools we've been using so far?
I would not be confident that you wouldn't have to like rebuy all of the material to run in their custom VTT.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not doing that. Like
Mm-hmm.
I've already spent my money on Roll20. I've spent money in
Mm-hmm.
Foundry. Like I'm not adding a third one. Um I actually don't care about the 3D immersive
Mm-hmm.
isometric sort of
Same.
thing that much.
Same.
Um the overhead view with the miniatures is fine. And oh, that reminds me, another thing I would add, and it's really easy to do in a virtual tabletop. It's not necessarily rules as written, but sightline
Mm-hmm.
indicators,
Mm-hmm.
like the stealth mini game with the Starian of like
Yep.
trying to figure out the right time to use that bonus, that cunning action to hide. Like
Yep.
I'm like, this is fun.
Mm-hmm.
uh this is a challenge that I have to figure out how to do. Like I'm sliding behind a statue, stealthing, popping out, doing the sneak attack. Like
Yep. Yep. I definitely been thinking about all this too, and I have no interest in the Wizards of the Coast immersive virtual tabletop. I'm okay with using Roll20, but I want to use it like we would use the, wipeable graph with the markers that we used to use back in the day when it was, you and me and Mike and Meredith and Carrie and Hale, and then eventually Rich Ronaldo, co-creator of Velvet Generation. That group, we would just set out like a laminate, not laminate, but I'm forgetting the name of the material, but you can draw on it with, markers, the appropriate kind of markers, and then you can just wipe it clean. And that's what our grid was. So you could be like, wow, there's like a building over here. There you go. For the audio listeners, Jesse has just held up a package of markers that are appropriate for, what is it, dry erase,
wet
um,
erase. Do
wet
not use
erase.
dry erase markers on your vinyl
This is, I always
mat.
get things screwed up, but you just sort of like, well, here's a building over here. It's got X number of rooms, and we'll put a barrel, and then we'll put a bed over here. Like that's how I want to do it. Like I want to use Roll20 and just create that basic blueprint style area for everybody to move around in. And I think, you could, I'm sure Roll20 has something you can manage with in order to create that experience that you're describing with the stealth movement. You just can't make them move around the map.
Yeah, I mean, like you just got to sketch in the site, the walls, like the
Mm,
line blocking walls. And I honestly, I think Foundry's better at it. I think it's better at it.
for sure.
I will say this: I have that new marker pack. This is just a little aside from my personal gaming experience. So I have been occasionally playing Dungeons and Dragons with my two children, who are 5 and 7. We are not playing official Dungeons and Dragons rules. We are using a very heavily modified version of Old School Essentials, where they basically have 3 stats: strong, smart, and fast.
Mm,
Um, and so my daughter is Alaska the Witch, and my son is Vainier the Warrior. Um, and we were playing the other day, and we get to a point where I got to draw the next room, and I realize my dry erase marker is, or my wet erase marker is out of ink, and my daughter just flips out and refuses to play anymore.
oh no.
Like, I will not play if you're not drawing the next room. I'm like, we can just describe and use our imagination. She's like, no, I'm not playing, and no one's playing.
Oh
Tried to take her
wow.
brother's mini. I was like, wow, that is a reaction. And then
Mm-hmm.
the other cool thing, this is just, I'm proud of my son. I don't know why he had no control over it. I had just bought them their first dice sets.
Nice.
So thanks to Renegade Game Studios, there's some very colorful, sparkly My Little Pony themed polyhedral die. And Sheridan has red Power Ranger polyhedral die where the 20 is the little Power Ranger lightning bolt, right?
Nice.
Um, Sheridan's like, I'm like, okay, you step on the third step and the stairway becomes a ramp and spikes come out of the ground at the bottom, pointing straight up. You start sliding down. What do, Vainier the warrior? And he's like, I'm going to take my sword. I'm going to chop those spikes as I slide to them. And I'm like, okay, that's going to be really, really hard to do. Just so you know, there's a very good chance that that will not succeed. He's like, it's all right. I'm like, okay. So he grabs his D20. They know all the dice. He grabs
Mm-hmm.
his D20.
Mm-hmm.
He rolls his first roll with his new dice. It's a 20.
Beautiful.
They get into that room. There's a giant 5 hit die stone statue because I'm running an old school adventure. There, I am not pulling punches. Like,
You're a good man.
yeah, learn the hard way, kids, and you'll
Yep.
do better later.
Mm-hmm.
Sharon goes up to swing at it, rolls another 20. Like,
Beautiful. How
and
do you
then
not go ahead?
his sister wanders back and it's like, oh, I guess I want to play again. Like, I'm gonna cast a spell at that thing. I'm like, okay, cool. And so they wound up taking this thing down with no damage. The adventure, by the way, out there, it's a great resource, listeners. It's Tomb of the Serpent King by Skirples. It is designed to teach people how to play old school games. There's like commentary for each room of the dungeon about the lesson the players can learn there. Like sometimes empty rooms have secret things.
Hmm.
Sometimes there are traps. Sometimes the traps reoccur. Like,
Beautiful.
so yeah,
That's awesome.
it's cool.
That's awesome. I love that you're teaching your kids how to play. So jealous. here's here's how my gaming experience went with my dad the one time I got him to play. And he was the one that brought me this game, that brought us this game. He's the one that tried to run the first out of the book adventure. It didn't go so well because we didn't understand what was happening. And, one out of two of us was super young. Or I'm sorry, one out of three of us. And my bad. But anyway, so years and years and years later, I'm trying to get him to play with my current group. And he was really obsessed with Shogun, that book series. And he was like, well, I would only play. I'm like, just play once. He's like, well, I'd only play if I could play a samurai, and they probably don't have that. I'm like, they do have that. It's a kit in this second edition book. I'll make you a character. And before he could go, shit, what did I get myself into? We were playing a game. What's the first thing he wants to do in this game? He wants to attack something. He draws his katana across his lap as he, starts to get up. Then he goes into roll. He gets a natural one. So guess what happens? He drops his sword. And then he goes, well, I dropped my sword. I dishonor my master. I commit seppuku. And then he gets up and walks out of the room. So all I'm saying is, Jesse Sauer, I appreciate you.
My dad, I had made, we were doing the Sunless Citadel in 5e because it's in Tales from the Yawning Portal, like a 5e adaptation. And we were at a Michigan house with the whole family, and the nephew wanted to play. Like, so we're like, cool. Who all's in? I've got like 5 pre-made character. My dad takes the wizard and names him Buttlinger the Wiz.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's my dad. And we played, and Buttlinger the Wiz cast spells and had fun, and it was a good time.
Well, now you guys know a little bit more about us, our fathers, and our children. Well, Jesse's children. I don't have children yet. So, Jesse, is there anything else? This is kind of just like a first impression of Baldur's Gate 3. I'd like to do at least one more of these later on after I've played through most, if not the rest of the game. But is there anything else you'd like to close out with?
I mean, just not since Planescape Torment have I had like an isometric RPG that is so much fun. And Planescape was mostly just because it's so weird. But yeah, I highly, highly recommend this game. I do want to say one of the other things I read that just cracked me up Is I read this on Twitter. Someone was just like, the thing about Baldur's Gate 3 is so many people are playing D&D 5e for the first time without the dungeon master fudging rolls, and they hate it.
That's awesome.
Oh, and turn karmic dice off if you want a real
Oh
D&D
yeah.
experience. Yeah, there's a
Yep.
setting in gameplay called karmic dice that I guess will give you, like, tweak the die rolls a little if you have a string of bad luck. Turn that off. The bad
Yes.
luck. Yeah.
Yes, I definitely did. I am so glad you pointed that out because otherwise I wouldn't have known it was there. And I absolutely love all the bad rolling that occurs. I've gotten people, there's a burning building. I couldn't save the dude in time. I didn't make my rolls. I didn't get there. He died. And there's a part of me that was like, oh, I feel horrible that this happened, but I'm loving every second of it.
Yeah, every time I've had that conversation with Kaga, the druid, and her
Mm-hmm.
viper and the kid, I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm gonna have to kill this woman.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't matter if I'm the warlock or the fighter. I'm like, we're about to fight, and I'm gonna kill your little snake, and I'm gonna kill you, and I'm probably gonna have to kill every druid in this room. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Your group comes up covered in blood, and they say to the tieflings, well, the good news is you don't have to leave the grove.
yeah, the ritual isn't happening.
The bad news is all the druids are dead. We're covered in blood for a completely unrelated reason. All right. Well, I love this game. I think about it all the time. I play it whenever I can. And if you've been playing Baldur's Gate 3 and you want to tell us about what's happening, that would be wonderful. Except for you need to keep your emails short. Jesse, do we have an email address that the listeners can contact us at?
We do. We are jauntymantis@gmail.com.
All right. We also have social media. We're the Wanty Mantis on Twitter, or X as it's called, or as I'd like to call it, X. And I think we're also on Threads at the Jaunty Mantis.
Well, I think
And
since we're talking about Baldur's Gate and Faerun and the fact
mhm,
that Drizzt Do'Urden was in Baldur's Gate 3, I think
mhm.
we should call it His Swords Crossed in an X.
Yes, for sure, for sure. And you can check Jesse out online at Jingoist Fet. It's a very clever handle on Twitter, and other places.
Yes, also Threads, also the Instagram. Uh,
I forgot about the Instagram.
I've been debating doing TikTok.
Oh wow.
Yeah, because there's some real low hanging fruit where people just like hold an RPG book up to the camera and are like, this game is about this. You should play it because blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, I could do that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think we actually only really mentioned the email in the last two episodes. So maybe,
Mm-hmm.
maybe after this one, we're desperate to hear
Yes.
short, concise messages from
Mm-hmm.
you, the listener.
Yeah. And if you can think of what's a way this game has changed your TTRPG experience, or at least made you think about changing your TTRPG experience, or maybe you did something really cool in the game and you want to tell us about it, but just keep it short and concise.
I feel like we're kind of sending out mixed messages here. I don't know.
It is what it is. We'd love to hear from you, but only in small amounts. There.
Yes.
All right. Well, this is the Jaunty Mantis podcast. These are very creative questions for curious gamers. I'm Maddie, or Matthew, or whatever, and my
I'm
co-host
Jesse.
Jesse. Oh, there we go. Say it again.
I'm Jesse.
There you go. And we have a catchphrase. Get out there, play some fucking Baldur's Gate 3.
Yeah, go play some fucking Baldur's Gate.
All
Good
right.
night, everyone.